Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. Ryan is a family man, first and foremost, but he's also a pastor, publisher, and serial entrepreneur. This podcast will help you think, work, and create like never before.
Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. This is Ryan Frank, and thank you so much for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about creativity and leadership. Those two don't always seem to go hand in hand. A lot of times you think about somebody that's a leader, and then you think about somebody that's really creative, and they don't always go together, but they should go together. And we've all been wired with some creativity because we were made in the image of God, the most creative being that has ever existed and will ever exist. And my guest today is Brittany Nelson. Before I introduce Brittany, do you have your tickets to the Kids Matter Conference? The Kids Matter Conference is right around the corner, just a few months away. It's happening September 12th, 13th, and 14th outside of Nashville, Tennessee. We are super excited about this year's event. If you've never been to the Kids Matter Conference, this is the premier, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, the premier event for children's ministry leaders and their teams. This fall, we'll have 3,000 people attending the conference, plus a bunch of volunteers and ministry partners. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful event, and we'd love to see you there. What you can expect is nearly 200 specialized ministry breakouts, 6 amazing main stage sessions with worship and keynote speakers. We're going to have over 90 ministry partners, curriculum providers, people that can do events for your children's ministry, people with furniture and environments for your children's ministry, camps, so much more at the Kids Matter Conference. And someone is going to win a car. We just recently announced that we are giving away, for the second year in a row, a Mini Cooper. And maybe you will be the one that will drive away with that new car. It's all happening this fall. Please jump over to thekidsmatterconference.com. Get signed up. Nashville, Tennessee is within a one-day driving distance of nearly 80% of the continental United States. So there's a good chance that you can load up the van, bring your team, and I promise you won't be disappointed. Go get your tickets at thekidsmatterconference.com. Today I had the opportunity to sit down and chat with Brittany Nelson. Brittany is a children's pastor. She is also the creator of deeperkidmin.com, which is a wonderful, wonderful ministry partner of ours and a great resource that all of you children's ministry leaders need to know about. Today we talked about creativity and leadership. We had a wonderful conversation around what does it look like to be creative? What if I don't feel creative? How do you keep those creative juices flowing? What do you do when you hit a block and you just feel like, I'm not creative? And so much more. Wonderful conversation. That I'm just going to stop with the intro here. Let's get this show on the road. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. Here's my conversation with Brittany Nelson. Hey, Brittany, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Hey, Ryan, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we've tried to do this for a few weeks, and then it's all on me. I've had to reschedule, and you've been so patient. Thank you so much. We are finally here talking to each other on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So, yeah, I'm excited for you to share. If you are, if you've never met Brittany just, I already introduced her, but she just has so much energy and passion and creativity. And when you meet Brittany, you always remember her because of her smile and just her passion. And she is creating some amazing, amazing resources. Brittany, I don't want to assume everybody that's listening or watching the podcast has met you.
Sure.
So take a few minutes and just tell us your journey.
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
yourself.
Absolutely. So I like to say that God tricked me into children's ministry. That's how I phrase it. Because I wanted to be a high school language arts teacher, and everything I did from high school graduation all through college was to help prepare me to be a high school language arts teacher. And then God was like, nope, I called you to be a teacher. I didn't ever say what kind, to kind of put me into children's ministry. And I was a children's pastor at a local church for about 5 years. My husband was the youth pastor at the same church, which was great. We were also a mobile church, which meant that like the children's ministry supply closet was the spare bedroom in our house.
I bet. Yes.
We met at a local high school. So it was just, that comes with its own challenges in ministry, right? But about 5 years in, we kind of knew that both of us leading on staff at the level and the pace that we like to do ministry wasn't going to be sustainable long term. And so I started praying and exploring and trying to figure out, well, then what does that mean? Because I feel very called to children's ministry. And so God changed my plans again. And I kind of decided, well, if I can't be a children's pastor, then I want to support children's pastors. And so I started a website, a blog called Deeper Kidmen. That's kind of like Teachers Pay Teachers or Download Youth Ministry, very similar to the Kids Matter store as well, where it's just a platform where leaders can share and sell the resources that they've created for their ministries. It started out, it was just me kind of sharing the stuff that I had done because I had written a lot as a children's pastor. And then I'm like, well, I'm not the only one who's ever done this. And so created the part of the platform that allows other people to do the same thing. And so that's about 5 years old now. And so it's been such a great adventure. I am so enjoying what I get to do with Deeper Kidmen and resourcing the children's ministry community. I volunteer now in our children's ministry, and my husband's still a youth pastor. So I get to volunteer with the youth ministry. So I'm a 2nd and 3rd grade small group leader at our church on Sunday mornings. I joke that I get to do all the fun parts of children's ministry now without having to do all the parts that like make your head spin and your eyes go cross-eyed.
Exactly.
So, so I still get to be involved in children's ministry, just in a different capacity now. I love it.
So I didn't know, Brittany, that you had such a love for language arts, for English.
Yes.
We probably would not have been friends. We probably would not have been friends in high school, or I would have cheated off of you. English is not, still to this day, is not my forte. Participles and all that kind of stuff.
I love it.
So did you go to college and study?
I did. So I started out as in English education was my major, and then switched to just English lit. And then I was going to go to grad school for English education because I went to school in a different state. But I knew I was coming back to my home state of Georgia. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to get my degree in another state and then have to retake a bunch of tests to get credentialed in the state of Georgia to teach. So I did just English lit. And actually I had grad school all lined up. Like I had done the admissions test, gone through the admission process, was accepted, and was like, was going to defer for a year so that I could get married. Then I was going to go back into grad school, but never ended up going back to grad school for that. I ended up going to seminary instead a few years later. But I mean, English education, like I was going to be a high school language arts teacher, and that's what I wanted to do.
So what happened where all of a sudden you make this switch and you realize God's actually, I mean, what was it? Was there a switch where you realized God's called me to this, or was it just a door that opened, you started to walk down it, and with time that calling became evident?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my senior year of college, my former children's pastor, who had been doing children's ministry for over 25 years, was ready to step down and move on. And they were starting the church plant that we were part of, that was the mobile church. And she said, Brittany, I'm ready to step down. We want to hire in 2 part-time people with the goal that after a year, one person will step off and the other person will take things over. And we want you to be one of those people. And so this was my senior year, like I said, of college. And so I said, yes, but I want to be the one that leaves. I said, I will do it, but I'm going to be the one that's out after a year, because I'm going to go to grad school. I'm going to teach high school language arts. Like that's what I'm going to do. And
so you literally just thought, I'll help you during this transition.
Yeah.
It'll be a job.
And that was it. And then I was at a conference, actually, a children's ministry conference, probably about 7 or 8 months into this position, and had loved it and was really enjoying it, and felt like God was giving me a vision for the ministry that I was like, God, you should probably tell the other person this because I'm not going to be here in 4 years. You should talk to the other person. But I was praying during the first night of worship at this conference and just really kind of frustrated with God. Honestly, I was like, God, why am I here? Like, why are you telling me these things? Tell this to the other person, because I'm not in this for the long run. I want to be a teacher. And he very, very audibly said, I called you to be a teacher, but I never said what kind. And so from that point on, I was like, okay, like, fine. Like, this isn't even the age group, God, that I wanted to work with. But from that point on, I just said, okay, I guess I'm doing children's ministry now. And like I said, ended up not going to grad school for English education and did seminary a few years later instead. And struggled actually for a long time, for a few months after that, of why. I'm like, God, I can do all the other things, like I know how to edit papers, and I can read a good book and write a good book report and teach others how to do that too, and he answered that question too. And he just said, well, he kind of said, if you succeed in children's ministry, you'll know it's because of my strength and not your own.
Man, that's so good.
He said, you're not prepared for children's ministry, and that's what I want. He's like, that's where I want you to be. I was like, oh, okay, and so it really taught me to rely on teams and the people around me, and to rely on God and the way he was going to equip me, because I had no clue what I was doing.
Yeah. Wow. So you went through that year of transition, and then I assume you're the one that made the cut, or?
Yep. So I'm the one that stayed on staff. The other person ended up stepping down. And then I ran the ministry for about 4 more years before. While you were doing seminary at the same time? Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. Yep. And what did you study in seminary? So it's a children's, youth, and family ministry.
Nice.
Yeah. With Indiana Wesleyan. Yeah. Indiana Wesleyan University. Yep.
Did I know that?
I don't know, but I know you're connected with them somehow, right?
Okay. If I knew that, I'm on a trustee there.
Okay.
Graduate. If I knew that, I forgot that. That is so neat. Okay. Yeah. So you did that through Wesley Seminary.
Yes.
How cool. Okay. I probably knew that and forgot, but that's really neat. And we have a good number of Kidman Academy students that end up going on to Wesley Seminary and pursuing that program. And they've worked with us. It's a really sweet deal where they recognize that our Kidman Academy program and give you X number of college credits toward that seminary degree or undergraduate degree, which is nice.
That's great.
So today, Brittany, we're talking about creativity and leadership. And, a lot of times when you think about a leader and you think about creativity, they don't always go hand in hand. A lot of leaders that we think of, maybe they aren't creative, but they really can go hand in hand, and probably should go hand in hand. And I want to unpack that with you, because you are a creative person. You work with creatives all the time and Deeper Kidman. We serve the children's ministry community. So one thing that we have in common, which are some of the most creative people on the planet. We're also both leaders. We work with leaders. So I'm excited about this conversation. How do you define creativity? And then how does it play into leadership, whether it's a children's ministry leader or a leader of, a business, somebody in the marketplace or in the business world? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So I think creativity is one of the most beautiful examples of being made in the image of God, right? Like it's a reflection of God's creator character in us. And so creativity is the way that God shows the creator side of who he is in his creation. I just think it's, God is super creative, right? Just look at everything that exists in the world. And so I think creativity is just kind of the manifestation of that within us. And I think in leadership, it's so valuable on so many levels. And I think you bring up a great point that sometimes people think leadership and creativity don't go together, because I think sometimes we think of creativity as just like wild and sporadic, and there's paint splattered everywhere, and like almost beautiful chaos. And I think that can be part of creativity, but I think creativity can also be organized and have very clear definitions as well. And I think one of my favorite quotes about creativity, John Acuff says it all the time, but it's not his quote. It's from Dorothy Parker, who's an American poet. And she says that creativity is a wild mind and a disciplined eye. And so it's that combination of the freedom and the wildness combined with the discipline to kind of pull out the key elements and the key components. And I think that's kind of the sweet spot for leadership and creativity, is when you have that wild mind, that ability to dream and to, see lots of opportunities and possibilities. But then you also have that disciplined eye to be able to narrow it down and pick out what's going to be the best way forward, or the best option for your context and for your team that you're working with. So that quote, "The creativity is a wild mind and a disciplined eye," is probably my favorite way to define.
Yeah, that's so good. You really do need to have both, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are some misconceptions that you think people have about creativity?
Well, I think the first one, probably the biggest one, is that you either have creativity or you don't, or that you're either a creative person or you're not. But really, creativity is a skill, just like any other skill. And so the good news there is that it can be taught, right? It can be strengthened. It's almost like a muscle, right? Like if you use a muscle more and train a muscle, then it's going to get stronger and get better. And so you can actually become more creative than you are now. Or so if someone feels like they're not creative, I think that's a big misconception, because I think everyone is creative and can be creative, because again, we're made by a creative God. And so I think that's probably the biggest misconception, is that, oh, I'm just not a creative person. Well, you are. It might just look different than the artist who's can paint beautiful painting. Like I can't draw worth anything, but I'm a creative person, right? So it's just different types of creativity and skills that can come out in different ways.
That's true. I think a lot of people do struggle with that, and probably because in their mind, they define creativity as just what you said, whether it's playing music or creating, something, or drawing something, or designing a house, or, whatever they have in their mind. And they're like, I'm not. Do you think, and I agree too, Brittany, that creativity is a skill and it's something that we can develop. Do you think we're all creative? Like, do you think God makes us as creative people? Like, do you think we are genuinely all creative people? Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. I think there's creativity in all of us. I think, like I said, it comes out in different ways. I think it gets hindered by the speed and kind of the pace of lifestyle that we live. Just the busyness, I think, is kind of one obstacle, or, like it hampens, or I don't know if that's a word, but it reduces our creativity. But yeah, I think everyone is creative on some level. It's just a matter of how much we use that muscle, and how strong it is, and even how valuable we may think it is for what we do.
For sure. What are some things, Brittany, that you do? Because you're very creative. And I love, part of your story is you found yourself in this season of life where you needed to transition, do something different. And so you created this blog, this website, this store, this platform. And so you are creative. You're creating products. You're on social media doing these creative things. What do you do to stay creative? What inspires you? How do you keep those creative juices flowing?
For me, the biggest thing that I've learned is that I have to make time to rest, and I have to make time to step away from being creative and creating and producing and always working and having my mind going, so that I can be creative later on when it is time to work and it is time to get things done. And I'm not a very good rester. Like I don't like not doing anything. I love vacations, but even on vacation, I'm like, "Ooh, we could do this," or, this sparks this idea, and so being really, really intentional with finding times of rest and working rest into my schedule. And Sabbath, like I spent a whole year kind of researching Sabbath and learning about Sabbath and what that looks like. And so that's been the biggest thing for me to fuel my creativity, is finding time to rest so that the creativity can actually come out and it's not just exhausted all the time.
Is rest for you like I step away for a couple of days? Is it making sure I get a good night's sleep? Is it
Definitely
I'm going to
sleep.
turn off the computer for a couple of days. What's it look like for you?
Yeah. So it's definitely sleep, which I have a 5-month-old and a 3-year-old. So sleep is hit or miss. They're both great sleepers. It's fantastic. They're great sleepers. I can't complain there, but just the season of life that I'm in, sleep is not always as readily available as it used to be. But sleep, another one would just be stepping away from the computer and even getting out in nature or like going for walks, moving physically. So even if I'm not resting physically, like resting mentally is really important for me. And one thing too that I found is I can't work past a certain time at night because it takes my mind about 2 hours to shut down at the end of the day. And so I've got, like, if I try to, keep working up until 11 o'clock and then go straight to bed, it's 1 o'clock before I'm even close to being asleep.
Well, that's true.
So I've had to be intentional with not working past like 7 or 8 p.m. So that I have that time to unwind and to let my brain slow down and shut down before I try to actually sleep.
So when do you find time? I mean, you're at home with these two little kids, you're busy. How do you find time to get all this stuff done? Because is it possible to schedule blocks, or is it more you're looking for opportunities, and when you have them, you jump on it and take it? What's that look like?
So I'm definitely a schedule person. And so I have things on my calendar, usually a lot, months, several weeks in advance when I can. But even just day to day, I know, especially when my 3-year-old is in school 2 days a week. And then both of them are napping. Like right now, they're both asleep. So I know I have an hour, at least an hour, hour and a half every afternoon where they're napping. The littlest one still sleeps in the morning. So I have 2 hours in the morning when the 3-year-old is at school. So just being aware of those chunks of time when I have larger blocks of time to myself and being like, okay, during these next 2 hours, this is what I want to get done. This is what I need to focus on. This is what I need to write. And also knowing that I'm a more creative person in the morning. Like before our second child was born, I would get up at 5 and work from 5 to 7 before our 3-year-old got up and got so much work done. In just those 2 hours, because that's just when my brain was the most creative. So if I had a big project that I needed to write or something that I was designing or like needed a lot of creativity for, I have to do it in the morning. I can do it in the afternoon and evenings, but it just takes a lot longer. Like I feel like I'm like walking through molasses, like trying to get through something. Like it can still get done, but there are times that I'm like, you know what, if I just wait and do this in the morning, I'll get it done in half the time. And so I'll switch gears and do something that's a little less creatively intensive. For the afternoons and evenings. So for me, it's blocking time and knowing, okay, I've got these 2 hours until the girls wake up that, I got a shot clock on what I can do, because someone's going to need me to change a diaper or get them a snack or, whatever, when
always something
over.
I think that's all so great and helpful. Thank you. And I also like that you've identified that, I'm better in the mornings. That's not the case for everybody, although I have read a good amount of research that most people are at their best in the mornings. It's not 100%, but a majority of people do. Your brain is the sharpest. It functions the best those first several hours of the morning. So, I would encourage each of you, if that's you, if you feel like, that's me, make sure that you are, don't waste those precious moments of the morning on YouTube or TikTok or Snapchat or, do an email or whatever, unless you have to do that stuff. Really use that time to do those most important things, that stuff that's going to require you to be creative and sharp. Brittany, do you ever find, I think I know the answer to this question because you're a human and we all do, but do you ever find that you just get stuck? You need some creative ideas, but it's just not there. When that happens, what do you do? Does it go back to that, I just need to rest, or are there some other things that you have learned that you can do to get unstuck?
Sure. That's a good question. For me, usually if it's just starting out and I'm like, I can't quite figure it out, then I'll try and talk it out with a friend or with my husband. And I'll just say, hey, I have this idea. can I tell you about it? And I just need to process out loud sometimes. And sometimes that helps. But again, even like talking with people, getting their ideas, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And just in conversation that can spark an idea for me.
Yeah.
But then there are times when I'm like, this, I just can't, I just don't know. And I have to just walk away.
Yes.
And whether that means go for a walk or like go do something, like go fold laundry, like doing something physical, that kind of gives your mind something to focus on, but then your subconscious can still be working on that problem, and trying to find a creative solution to whatever it is. But yeah, sometimes just walking away, shutting the computer, saying, all right, I'm going to take 24 hours. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to, intentionally pursue it. And if it comes in my brain, I'll just kind of let it float there and see what happens. But, putting it aside for 24 hours and coming back to it later.
That's smart.
Are a lot of the things that I do. So talking it out with someone and sparking ideas with them, or just walk away.
Or walk away. That's smart.
Yeah.
Brittany, what would you say to somebody who just feels like, man, I just don't feel like I'm a creative person. I wish I was, but I'm not. And although I think we both agree that every human being is creating God's image. God is, the most creative being that there is. So while we both understand, and even, probably all the listeners understand, God has wired me to be creative, yet I don't feel like I'm creative. What would you say to encourage somebody that feels that way?
Well, I would say, again, it's a muscle. And so it is something that you can work on. And some of the ways you can do that. One thing that I read recently, like in the last couple of weeks, a friend, Joy Knupp, sends out emails about leadership and things like that. And one of her emails was about the importance of creating before consuming. And that has been so helpful for me. And so her biggest thing was, hey, before you get on social media, before you check your emails, do that creative work. And so if someone is out there listening, thinking, I want to be more creative, or I don't feel like I am creative, then I would say, when you get up in the morning, or when you're in a time of transition and you're heading into kind of your workspace and your workplace, take a few minutes, even if it's just 10 minutes, to create, to allow yourself to think, to kind of let your mind wander, to do the creative aspects of your job before you jump into consuming information and consuming stuff on social media, and consuming even emails can be a creative suck hole sometimes, and just drain the creativity because your mind gets so distracted by other things. So first I would say consume before you create, and then just make it a daily habit of stepping away from your phone, stepping away from your computer, getting outside. I think that's one of the easiest ways to kind of stir our creativity, is to get out in nature. So whether it's watching a sunset or a sunrise, or if they're even just sitting on the patio in your backyard and like paying attention to details. So I think that's a lot too of what creativity does, is it finds details that maybe other people don't notice or don't see, and finds value in those details. And so giving yourself that time to be mindful of what's around you and notice the little details, and getting out in nature, I think is a big one too. But just practice making it a habit, making it a part of your day. Right. Just like you check email, just like you do your exercise, just like you brush your teeth, like all of it, just making it a habit.
I think a lot of it is a mindset. You're right. And a choice that, I may not feel creative, but God created me. He is the most creative being ever. I am creative. I'm going to grow in this area. I'm going to find something new to do. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. I think, Brittany, you're a great case study on getting outside of your comfort zone, trying something new. I learned today, you loved English in high school, English major in college, wanted to go teach English.
Yep.
And then you take this church job, which is out of your comfort zone, learning new skills. And then you decide to launch this business, which requires some, business acumen and, a lot of your business, because you and I are friends and our ministries do stuff together, and I follow you. You do a lot of social media stuff. to drive traffic to your website. So you launched this business with no business degree. You're doing, social marketing without a marketing degree. Running a business, you have to know your numbers and all of this with no accounting degree. Was all that was launching Deeper Kidmin? Was it a piece of cake? Did it put you out of your comfort zone? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, it definitely pulled me out of my comfort zone. And as you're talking through all that, another one of my favorite creativity quotes came to mind from Simon Sinek. And he says, creativity begins the moment we don't know what we're doing. That's exactly right. Like that, okay, well, I'm not going to be a high school teacher. Now I'm going to be a children's pastor. What does that look like? And just the creativity that fueled that season. And then, okay, well, I'm not going to be a children's ministry leader anymore, but I'm still want to do something with children's ministry. What does that look like? I have no idea. But no, it definitely was not easy. And I dealt with a lot of, and still do sometimes, of imposter syndrome and thinking, well, no one's ever going to read this blog, or like no one would ever pay for this resource, or, just so many different things of doubting whether or not something would work. And sometimes it doesn't work, right? Like I think part of creativity is learning to be okay with failing, which for me, failing was like my F word for a long time.
Yes.
And as I've gotten older and experienced more things, like I can say failure without dying inside, And so I think, just being willing to experiment. But no, it definitely was not easy. There, like I said, there are still times when I'm like, oh, well, this is it. Like the whole thing's going up in flames. And my husband is like, that's not how it works.
Like, you're good.
The whole thing is not just going to crumble in a day. I'm like, no, this is it.
I'm curious, what do you enjoy most about leading Deeper Kidmin day after day? And then what do you least enjoy?
That's a good question. So probably my favorite thing about it is being able to connect with people and help them kind of make the resources that they've created even better. So like I said, I love editing. And so, so seeing the creative things that other leaders submit and being able to read through all that, like I just get to look at that for my job, which is really fun. And then, so editing resources and creating them, like I still get to create my own all the time, which I love doing. And now that I have kids of my own that are getting older, I'm excited. I think I created something for Valentine's Day this year that I was actually able to use with my family in that season. And so that was really fun. So just the creative process of creating resources that other people can use and meeting the creators of those resources. And then my least favorite part of the job is probably like the budget and the accounting and all that number stuff. Because even as a ministry leader, that was my least favorite part. And it still is. So having to keep track, like I'm not a budget person anyway, which you can ask my husband about that. He can tell you. I get it. So I don't like the numbers. And I'll like, the accounting side of things.
What would you say to somebody who is watching or listening that's inspired by your story? Maybe they have a business they've always wanted to start, or a side hustle they've always wanted to start, or they've always wished that they could jump tracks and do this, but they're scared to do it. Any words of encouragement for somebody that, man, is just inspired by your story? What are some, let me ask you this, instead of words of encouragement, what do you think are a few good steps that person could take to move toward that direction?
Yeah, that's good. I think the first thing, because this is one of the first things I did that was so helpful to me, was talk to the people who are doing what you want to do. So when I first started Deeper Kidmin, I think I even emailed you, Ryan, and was like, hey, Ryan, I want to be like you. Can you talk to me for 5 minutes?
I remember that.
And so I did that to you. I did that to several other people who were in the children's ministry resource space, or blogging or creating resources, or just had a leading voice in children's ministry. So if that's you, if you're trying to, figure out something new or change directions, whatever that looks like, talk to the people who are doing what you want to be doing and say, hey, how did you get here? What encouragement would you have for me? Like, how did you start your podcast, or like whatever it is. talk to the people. Yeah, that would be the first thing I would say is talk to the people who are doing what you want to do. And it's not only helpful because you get some of their knowledge, right, that they're willing to share, but you also make friends. And like, that's been the biggest thing I've learned too, is you make connections, and not that you're in it to like try to get something from them later, right? But you just have those connections of people who are doing what you're doing. So they understand the imposter syndrome when it comes up, and they understand the days when the accounting is just so boring that, you know, like, but you have to do it because it's legal, right? Like, you have to stay legal. So talk to people who are doing what you're doing, and get their advice and their input and encouragement.
That's such a good starting point. If you don't go at it alone, for sure. I mean, get some support around you. As we start to wrap up the podcast, Brittany, who is somebody creative that you looked up to? And, you know, you've mentioned a few, John Acuff and stuff. Maybe it's an author, maybe it's a pastor, or friend. Who's somebody creative you look up to, and what have you learned from them?
I think John Acuff is probably one of the first ones that comes to mind. And from him, I've learned a lot about perfectionism and creativity, and how perfectionism can be kind of an obstacle to creativity sometimes. And I'm a perfectionist, so that like speaks to my soul a little bit. But I would also say Morgan Harper Nichols is an artist, poet. She's a lot of different things, but she is super creative and like makes beautiful things, makes beautiful digital art and other things, and writes poetry. And so from her, I think I've just learned to keep going. Like even small progress is still progress.
Yes.
And so that's something that I've learned from her. So she's another creative one. I think those two are probably the two that come to mind the most.
That's so good. She says small progress is still progress.
Yeah.
We beat ourselves up a lot, don't we?
Yeah.
But boy, don't do that. That's good. Okay. Well, this has been such a good conversation. If you're a children's ministry leader and you're watching on YouTube, or you're listening and you're not familiar with Deeper Kidmin, go to Brittany's website, deeperkidmin.com. You're going to find a lot of great resources there. Brittany, I always like to end the podcast by asking two questions. First of all, I'd love to hear from you, what's your favorite Bible story and why? What makes it your favorite Bible story?
Oh, that's such a hard question. That's
There's
like
so
asking
many
one of my kids is my favorite.
Yep.
I guess, okay, I'll say it changes with this, like with the season of life. And so it's different. Like if you ask me again in a year, it might be different, but I'll say right now, probably one of my favorite, and I guess, I don't know if it's a story, so I'm going to answer sideways to the question that you asked, but it's a person in the Bible, and it's Martha. So like Martha and Mary, you know, Mary sat at Jesus' feet, Martha was working, but then there's also the biblical account of Lazarus, and he has just died, and you know, Jesus has come, and Martha's like, Jesus, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died, you know, and Jesus is like, go open the tomb, and Martha says, Jesus, he's been in there 4 days, there will be a bad odor, right? Like Martha's literally like, Jesus, he's gonna be stinky. So just Martha and Mary, and kind of that balance of being both. I think a lot of times Mary is held up as we should be more like Mary. But I think Martha has a lot to bring to the table too. And so finding that balance and living in that tension between both Martha and Mary is kind of something that God's teaching me a lot about right now.
What a great, and you do need both, don't you?
Yeah.
All right. My second, great answer. That's a great story. And boy, you know, think about the stories Lazarus, you know, could tell. I mean, here he had been dead for 4 days, you know, gone to heaven, comes back. Fascinating stories. That's such a great story the whole way around. All right. Number two, I always like to ask everybody, what's one big thing that Brittany Nelson is working on right now?
Yeah. So probably the biggest thing is I wrote a book.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's with my editor right now. It's in the editing process, and it should release probably this August. but it's called Time for an Update, 7
Mm.
areas to integrate digital discipleship into your children's ministry strategy. So it's something I've been researching for
Nice.
about 3 years now. And I'm finally, I finally had enough conversations and interviews and research. I feel like I could keep doing more, but finally had to stop that perfectionism and say, no, it's got to be done. But that's releasing this fall. So I'm really excited about sharing it and, seeing what I've gotten great feedback on it so far. And that's something I'm working on that I'm
Congrats. I don't know that I knew that you were writing a book. That's really neat.
Thank you.
So give us a little bit of a teaser. What's one or two things that children's ministry leaders need to do to get that update, to really begin to leverage digital and tech and everything that you're sharing? Give us one or two things.
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is take a deep breath. It's okay. Digital discipleship does not mean that you have to start from scratch. It does not mean that you're starting over and that you have to throw out everything that you're doing and, rebuild something from ground zero. It just means you're going to integrate the digital world and technology into the strategies that you're already using. So take a deep breath. Doesn't have to be as intimidating as I think a lot of people think it can be. And it can actually be really easy. And then the second thing I would say is that when one of the chapters is about the teaching experience and what does it mean to teach today's kids who are digital natives. And I explain what that term means. And basically it just means kids who have grown up in a digital world, like they don't know life without the existence of the internet and smartphones and computers and all that kind of stuff. And it has influenced the way that they learn. Therefore, it should influence the way that we teach. And so there's a whole chapter about teaching digital natives and what that looks like in a ministry context. Because I think the education world is starting to figure it out and make some modifications. And usually the church world is way behind everybody else when it comes to some of the updates. And so being on top of that and integrating some of those ideas in a ministry context so that we can teach kids the most important thing, right? Which is the gospel and Jesus. So the way the digital world is influencing the way kids learn and how that should influence the way we teach the gospel.
Man, so good. Is it more than just, using a TV screen?
Yes.
And Pro Presenter?
Absolutely.
It is.
Yes. It's a whole strategy. It's not about apps or programs, right? Or things like that. It's ways to use those programs to connect with your people. Because digital discipleship is still discipleship, right? The main goal of growing kids deeper in their faith into a deeper, more vibrant relationship with Jesus, that goal doesn't change. Just the way that we do it does, because we have new tools in our tool belt or in our toolbox now that we can use from the digital world and technology.
Yes. Boy, this is going to be good. And, Lord willing, you're going to be with us at the Kids Matter conference this fall, right?
Planning on being there. Yep.
And you should have the book at the Kids Matter conference.
It will be released by then. Yep.
That is so exciting. When you started talking about it's with the editor and blah, 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 I was thinking, boy, I hope it's ready for the Kids Matter conference. Yep. And you said you'll have it in August. So it's going to be hot off the press at the Kids Matter conference.
Yep.
How exciting. How exciting. Way to go. I'm excited. We'll have to have you back on the podcast this fall to talk about that, to talk about the book and
absolutely
some of the stuff that you unpack in that teaching.
Great.
Have you all designed the cover of the book and stuff? Have you seen that?
We
Are you
have,
that far along?
yes. So I've got the cover of the book. There's 2 versions of it that I'm still trying to decide which one. I'll probably post them. They're very similar. One's basically a light version. One's basically a darker version of it. But I'll probably post that at some point and, vote for your favorite or whatever.
That's so exciting.
So it's all starting to come together, which is fun.
Yeah. Way to go. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's Brittany Nelson. Brittany, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to talk to me and all of our podcast listeners. You're doing a great job.
Thanks.
And I'm a big fan. Can't wait to see you this fall at the Kids Matter conference.
Yeah, should be fun.
Yep. All right. Thanks again, Brittany.
Thanks, Ryan.
This episode of the Ryan Frank podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more conversations to help you stay on the leading edge. And if you like what you've heard, please rate this podcast with 5 stars. Thanks so much, and we will talk to you next time.